I have hundreds of questions. I'm curious about the chart that you had of the functional MRI. Can you put that back up again? Can you?
Good question.
Yeah. That's my first one.
Can I? Can I is the question. Let's see about that.
Yeah, that one.
Is that the one?
Yes.
Okay. This is a classical figure from an important article that appeared in Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences in 2005. And I called this to the attention of Mind and Life a year later and met a lot of blank stares.
Mm.
But to my way of thinking, this is an absolutely pivotal insight into how the brain manages to vary its attentiveness. At the same time, inversely, it varies its expressions of our self-identity and our topographical self.
Yes. So I have a few questions about this. And I'm no neurologist.
That's all right. I like the way you started with, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Because it all has to start with curiosity.
Yeah. So I wonder, I understand this idea of this inverse relationship between these two lines, or these two sets of lines.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when the lines cross?
The lines.
Yeah. So not when they're at their base, but when they are crossing
at that point.
Is that a
when the
moment?
lines cross, this is the baseline,
Mm-hmm.
Which represents the actual crossing point between being hyperactive and being hypoactive.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you mean when the lines cross?
And so, in terms of consciousness or awareness, is that a moment when the lines are crossing? Is that a moment of static and confusion, or is that a moment in which there's the possibility of being aware of both self and other at the same time? That's what I'm
Wow,
trying to figure.
what a question. First of all, none of the subjects in this experiment were aware of anything other than that they were attempting to rest quietly in a functional MRI scan. So there wasn't anything unusual about consciousness.
Mm.
However, in subsequent experiments, when these investigators looked at how does the subject's performance change, doing certain motor acts or certain receptive acts, they found that they were more attentive and better functioning when the attentiveness was turned up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this really means that a demonstration was obtained that puts attentiveness at the forefront, at the pivotal forefront of all of our processing. Mm. You can't process anything in the brain that you aren't locked into with your attention. So these top-down and bottom-up systems of attention have to get stuck in a task and hooked on to the processing capabilities for that processing to occur at a relevant point. Attention is the arrow tip. The rest of the arrow and the feathers are part of the process. But you've got to train your attention when you're meditating by following the breath in and out repeatedly. You gotta sharpen your attention, in other words, in order for processing to occur. And this
Thank you.
enhancement of the attentive processing is a sign that attention has been deployed more efficiently. But the subjects don't know that. Subjects have no idea that their attentiveness is varying to this degree.
Interesting. Interesting.
But it is varying.
Yeah.
And it means that every 20 seconds or so, you've got a new brain. And you don't know it.
Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm curious.
You're
about
curious, great.
The trigger stimulus.
Trigger stimulus.
Yeah.
You want the slide up?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Just, I'm wondering in my life if I've had any like brushes with that sort of sensation or that sort of experience. And
Epiphanies,
yeah,
little quickenings of perception,
right.
little elevations.
Mhm.
And
Just those moments?
sure you have. You've had a lot of them.
Right.
And you'll have more of them if you're a meditator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You'll have more of them, and they'll be deeper, and they'll be more varied.
And thinking about the ones that I can recall now that I've had, I was often in nature, I think almost always in nature. And I was just wondering if you think that beauty can be the actual trigger stimulus.
Well, beauty has a very long history of being a trigger and stimulus. And the beauty of natural surroundings in particular have been spoken about in poetry for thousands of years. And at those moments, one finds extra clarity in perception and extra depth in the feeling associated with that beauty. And one notices that this comes on as an event, and that it has a diminuendo. And the several after feelings include, wouldn't it be nice if I could be in this state all the time? And the answer is no, it wouldn't be. It would get boring. And so be thankful that you have these epiphanies rarely that tell you that you have a heightened sensibility at that time. And that if you're curious enough to be a meditator, you'll be surprised at how being a meditator enhances not only your ability as a person outdoors, but your appreciation of poetry, for example. You'll be able to read between the lines of poetry with greater appreciation and pick up nuances that have significant meaning. Yes.
I really enjoyed the talk. Thank you so much. I'm curious if you've...
We have all these curious...
Yeah, I'm very curious.
This is wonderful. This is wonderful.
I'm curious if you've been able to look at the brain imaging of a person who claimed to be enlightened.
I would like to be able to do that, but I don't know of any good solid work that specifically looks at such a person who claims to be enlightened. and looks at it in a way that distinguishes between, hey, this is the way this special person was born anyway, and this is what was acquired by years of spiritual or meditative practice, nurture versus nature. So this is a very long and involved question that you're asking, and I don't think we're there yet.
But hypothetically, if we were to look at such a brain,
This is really pressing the speaker.
what would that graph look like?
Well, I think we'd find that the resting, let's talk about magnetic resonance imaging, let's say. Not so much functional magnetic fMRI, but faster means of determining brain activity. But let's look at functional MRI, because that's what we've been seeing. I think we'd see the regions of self would be hypoactive compared to controlled people. And I think we'd see that the bottom-up attentive processing would be more active, especially around the right temporal parietal junction. Because these have been, in short, the findings in studying long-term meditators, particularly a group of Tibetan meditators. And this long-range meditation group has shown findings in both of these directions.
Thank you.
So we're talking here about a dampening of the overactive self and a heightened activity in the bottom-up attention system. But we haven't said anything about the thalamus because people are not yet asking the right questions of the right nuclei in the thalamus at the right time. Not yet. Stay tuned.
Stick around.
Thank you. I hesitate to ask this question on a college campus, but I remember in the 1970s, Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, there was a lot of work with drug-induced states as a shortcut to getting.
We're getting an echo here, so I'm going to have to come a little closer to you to
Sure.
get the real you.
Yes. So let me begin by saying I'm not curious, okay?
Oh.
Okay. In the 1970s, there seemed to be a lot of work with Timothy Leary and Ram Dass about drug-induced states to get to these heightened levels of awareness. Do you have anything to say about that?
I think the most that I'd prefer to say is the phrase, I'm for meditation, not medication. At this time. There is some research at Johns Hopkins Medical School on the premise that the psychedelic state, either in response to oral LSD or to intravenous LSD, may have something important to convey, but the intravenous LSD is plagued really by the fact that the earliest swamping of the brain with an agent as powerful as LSD is rather like shooting an electrical impulse in your television set. and seeing how it changed the image that was on the screen. So that's really not going to tell us very much. I prefer the meditative route rather than the medicative route.
Hi.
Yes.
Do you know a lot, or do you know anything about how like different forms of meditation affect the brain differently?
A lot of people are doing, are studying different kinds of meditators, both Christian, Buddhist, multiple Christian types, multiple Buddhist types, yoga, Tai Chi, and so forth. And yes, the information that has been obtained suggests that there are results from each of these procedures, often different results, but nobody has yet been seriously asking the question with enough subjects to say that this kind of person, and you know there are many different kinds of people, is pursuing a more efficient spiritual course than somebody else because he or she is using Zen meditation versus Christian prayer. But there's a lot of results out there, but I don't think that there is an answer to your question that would be convincing at this time. But it's important for you to start some spiritual course and do that in the setting of some meditative training of your preference. Because just from the standpoint of a pause in the usual hectic overactivity and multitasking life that you're leading, I assume, just to be able to pause in that life and enjoy a quieter period and a more reflective look at what your life is and what your goals are. Meditation is unsurpassed for that and has been for thousands of years.
I guess personally, how did you decide on Zen Buddhism versus like different types of Buddhism?
Okay, you say you have?
Oh, I was asking how you decided on Zen.
By accident. By accident. I didn't know anything about Zen, but I was curious. I'm delighted to see that there's that quality in the audience, because that's what we're here for, and that's where we start.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. And thank you for mentioning about Tibetan Buddhism, Buddhist meditation, and I'm Tibetan.
You are Tibetan?
Yes, I am.
Oh.
So my question probably a Tibetan question.
That's okay.
Not Zen question, no this kind of scientific data or research question. My question is, in Zen you have Satori, right?
It's another word for awakening.
Right.
Some people distinguish between Kensho, which is sort of a preliminary awakening, and speak of Satori as a more further development of the awakening experience.
Okay.
So there are two words in Zen.
Okay. So let's say Satori. So you have the moment of Satori, and then in that moment you understand anattama, right? No self.
Loss of self.
Right. No self.
No self.
No self. And so I'm curious now, let's put it, make a connection with your scientific research. So the moment we do probably, if I interpret your presentation correctly, seems we do have that kind of moment, the moment of Satori, kind of, instead of egocentric, and we be allocentric. In that moment, ego is not there.
Correct.
right? So then,
The psychic sense of self in particular.
uh-huh,
In internal absorption, which is a preliminary state to awakening, the physical sense of self is also absent.
uh-huh,
But at that time, audition and vision are blocked.
okay,
But in Satori and Kensho, the world is completely open to audition and vision and all the other senses.
right, okay.
So there's a difference.
All right. So in that moment, and you see you're enlightened. In Buddhist language, you got a moment of enlightenment, or instantaneous, some kind of moment of awakening.
Mhm.
And so here's the question: what happened then, from scientific point of view, or the scientific point of view? That's what happened to the self. From that moment onwards, we still have a egocentric, right? We still have the strong sense of self, and we suffer because of that.
Mhm.
And so in the medical scientific research, you think, can we get there and by moment of see, there's no real self, either in whatever the way, the Satori, moment of Satori. I have many, right, Satoris. And then to the point, from there onwards, you're always allocentric, and then you're happy, make others happy.
In the old Chinese literature and in the Japanese literature, there have been masters who have said or alleged to have been enlightened at these moments over 10 times or so. And there has been with each such event a successive lessening of the egocentric self. But as you know, there's never been anybody with the wires on or in a functional MRI suite who at the very moment of Satori or Kensho has been measured. So this is the model that we've been talking about this afternoon is a model to be out there to help advance our understanding of what we're doing. The major point being that any training of attention is the preliminary basis for anybody on a spiritual path. Attention training is first and foremost. Train your attention to follow your breath in and out is the simplest way to begin.
If you don't mind, let me ask last question on my Tibetan question. So in Tibetan Buddhism, again, relate to the anattama idea, no self or not a self. And based on your meditation experience and your scientific research, is the soul is an illusion? Or idea of a self?
I've never been able to be comfortable with an understanding of what the word soul means to me as a neurologist or as a Unitarian, which is the way I started. I've never been comfortable with that word. It's not in my lexicon. So if you were to ask me about soul, I would say I don't know what soul really means. And I have, in particular, no idea about where soul is in the human brain. Sorry, but soul doesn't do it for me.
Thank you very much.
That may be it. We do have books outside the room, over beside the Starbucks, where Dr. Austin could answer more questions, and sign books if any of you would be interested in seeing some of his collection.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention.